So let's go a little bit further and start setting up our landing page, the very first page for our site. And what I have right now is I have this index.html file open. I'm going to close that, and I'm going to go over to my desktop. And if you look at the course resources for this page, you will find a file called images.zip. Download that. And when you expand it, it will expand to an images folder. And what I'm going to do is on my desktop, you can do it wherever, but remember where you put the files. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it Working HTML. You can call it anything. Inside of that, I'm going to put my images folder that I just extracted from the zip file, and I'm going to put the index.html file I've been working on right along. And there's a reason I'm doing that. What I'm going to do is go back to my text editor right here, and I'm going to open that index.html file that I had in the working, that I just moved into the working HTML folder. So this is our HTML file, and I can go back to my web browser, and I'll have to close that and reopen it because it's in a different location now, and reopen that file, and everything should work the same. Now there's a reason I did that, and the reason is pretty straightforward. If you look at the structure of our application, which is right here in GoLand, and let me open up that file I've been working on, bookings. In our roots file, which is right here, we created a couple of lectures ago this /static folder, and that's where all of our static images are, our static images and JavaScript and CSS files, anything that's not an HTML template, which when we actually convert it to a Go template will be a Go template handled by a handler. Anything that's not one of those has to live in this static folder. So to do that, I obviously have to do one more step. I need to create a static folder, static, and then move images inside of that. And the reason I've done this is when I work on my HTML, which we're going to do right now, I'm going to delete everything in the body tag, we need our images and so forth to be somewhere that the template can find them. And if I create the structures of folders as I just did, it means that the paths to images and so forth will be exactly the same in Go templates as it is in the HTML file. And it just makes it easier. I don't have to go fix a bunch of path names to files and images and so forth after the fact. All right, so we're going to create a landing page. So let's go look at Bootstrap, because that's what we're going to use as the CSS framework. So let's go back to getbootstrap.com. And let's look at examples, just to see what the kinds of things we can do. So here's some custom components, an album, pricing, checkout, a headline. What's this one? A carousel. Let's have a look at that. So at the top, we have a navigation bar that we can do things. We might have a search feature. We won't do that yet, but we might do it later on. And then we have this top thing. This is called an image carousel. And it's a means where you can show text with some kind of background image, which they don't have here. This looks like it might be useful. So let's have a look and see how we might do that. So let's go back and go to documentation. And let's start with some very basic things. I want to put that carousel there, and I want to have that navigation bar there for sure. Okay? So you'll notice here in this section where it says starter template. We've looked at this one already, and I said let's ignore this jQuery stuff for now. Well, let's not ignore it this time. And I have a little bit to say about jQuery, but that'll come momentarily. Let's just get a few things working first. Obviously, it says I need one of the two. I can either have jQuery, Popper, and Bootstrap.js, or I can have this one. Well, let's make sure that we're going to get everything we might possibly need. So I'll copy this one, except for the comments. And I'll go back into here, and where does it go? It goes just before the closing body tag. Okay, so I can do that, paste those in there, format it a little bit better, and save it. And let's go back and look at this again. Now, this is a really basic one. Because we built that, our page wound up looking like this, which isn't great. So let's just put a few things that I know we're going to have. When you create something in Bootstrap, you typically wrap it in a special HTML tag. We've seen ones like this, p/p for paragraphs. Well, we can also use divs, and a div is just a division. And this would have to have an opening tag and a closing tag. And this is going to wrap all of the content that displays for our users. And we're going to give that div a class. And a class is just the name of a CSS, or Cascading Style Sheet, directive. It's a collection of things inside a named part of the CSS file that says, take all of the styling I define here and apply it to this class. So we'll see how this works in just a moment. But we're using one. This class, where does this exist? Well, it exists in this Bootstrap file that I included up here. So it's one that's built by Bootstrap for us. And I'll put div class equals container. Okay? So that affects everything inside this div. Now, if I actually put this in here, put in something like this, h1 my title slash h1, let's see what changes that made. Well, I reload this and I should see only that title I just created. But notice how it's moved over. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so that container actually did something. It moved it to the left or to the right. So at least we know it did that. I'll get rid of that for now. Inside of the div class container, I'm going to put another div. Div class equals row. And of course, that has to have a closing tag. All right. What if I put my h1 in there now? h1 whatever. h1. Save. Reload. Okay. Well, it didn't seem to change anything. Inside of that row, I'm going to put another div. Div class equals call for column. And I'll wrap that, I'll put that around this h1 tag. And I'll format it again so we don't get lost in our HTML. And you should get in the good habit of indenting things as well. All right, so I put a column in there. So now I have a container, a row, and then a column inside that row. Let's reload it. Okay, I moved it a little bit, but I'm still not sure what's actually happening. Well, I'm going to copy this entire div class equals call. I'm going to paste it below it. I missed a part. Try it again. Div class equals call. I'll paste it once, twice, 3 times. So now I have 4 divs with class equals call. And I'll call this whatever 1, whatever 2, whatever 3, just so we can see where they go. And now when I reload this, look, it put them in columns. All right. What if I close this row, or after this row closes, I put another div class equals row div. And inside of that, I will put just a paragraph of text. This is some text, which I will now copy and paste a bunch of times just so it gives me a paragraph. Paste, 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 /p, save. Well, you can probably guess what's going to happen. These 4 columns exist in one row, and this one thing exists by itself. Now, I should have a column around that. I don't. Let's see what happens. Reload. All right. Now you see, because that doesn't have a column, it doesn't actually line up with this one. Let's put a column around that. Div class equals call. And then down here, I'll do another one. Close it. So now that I've wrapped it this way, and I save it, let's see what happens. Yeah, that lines up much, much better. Okay. So I have now a row and a row. And inside this row, I have 4 columns. And inside this row, I have 1 column. Let's try a third row. Div class equals row. And it has a closing div. And I'll put 2 columns this time. Div class equals call. Div class equals call. Div. All right. And inside of this, I'll put left call. And inside of this, I'll put right call. Let's save that. And it does exactly what I want. All right. Well, that's a good start, but it's still kind of ugly. I really want to make this a little more attractive. I really want to have that navigation bar at the top. Let's do that first, because we need a means of getting around the various pages of our site. All right, I'm in the documentation for Bootstrap, and I'm going to go down. Is it under Layout? Layout says Grid. No, we're talking about the grid right now, so we'll come back to that. Content. Typography, code, images, tables. No. Components. Components. Navbar. That's what we want right there. So let's look at that. So it describes it, and it says navbars require a wrapping navbar, blah, blah, blah. Good. We'll just scroll down and look for the example. Here's an example. I'm just going to copy this entire example, which I can do by clicking copy, and I will put that up here. Let's put it outside of the container and see how that works. Okay, so there it is. I'm not even going to bother formatting this right now because I'm going to change it. Let's go back and reload and see what happens. Okay, so I now have a drop-down menu. I have a home button. I have, great, okay, maybe I don't like that color. Can I do anything else with this? Let's go back to navbar. So, well, that's really not the color that I want. I want a darker navbar, just because I do. Let's keep going and see if we can find, color schemes. Theming for the navbar has never been easier, blah, 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 background color utilities. So it says nav class equals navbar dash dark and BG dark. Let's try that one. So where does that go? That's this, the nav class equals. Do we have a nav class equals? We do. All right. Now he's got navbar, when we copied it, we had navbar light and BG light. And here they have navbar dark and BG dark. Let's just replace those two parts because the other classes are probably doing something. And I'm not going to overwrite them. So let's paste that, save, go back, and reload our page. Okay, it's darker. That looks better. Excellent. Okay, now I don't want this search bar for right now, so let's get rid of that. And that appears to be right here. Form class equals, yeah, that's my search. Okay, and it's got a starting form tag and a closing form tag. Let's delete that and reload it. Okay, and now we have some links here. So we have a home. We definitely want that to be our home page. Okay, and we're going to want that. I'm not going to worry about this thing right now. We'll change that later. Link drop down disabled. Okay, so let's have, what are we going to have? We're going to have our home page, which is what we're working on right now. And what other pages are we going to have? Well, we have to have a page maybe about. So let's change that link to about. So let's find link. We'll change it to about. And all I have to do is change the text that's between the A tags. So about. Home is fine. I can leave that alone. And then we have this drop down, but I don't want to call it drop down. That's this menu right here. Maybe I'll make that for my rooms. Rooms. And how many rooms are we going to have? We're only going to have 2. So let's say room number 1. Now we have to come up with a good name for our room. So let's go with General's Quarters. And I'm just making this stuff up. And the second one will be C-O-L-E-N-E-L. How do you spell Colonel? Oh, I can't do that, so let's go with Major. Major's Suite. And then I don't care about these things, so I'll just delete those. Let's save that. And I don't care about the disabled. But maybe I want that to not be disabled, and I want to have a contact page. Seems to be useful. It would be useful to have people give people a way to contact us. Let's reload this. All right, so we have navbar, which we'll fix at some point. Home, about, rooms, and contact. And rooms gives us general quarters and major suite. All right. Now, these all currently link. If you look at the home page, for example, here's the home page. It links to hash, which means don't do anything. Okay, that just don't go anywhere. Actually, in some cases, if you're way down on the page, if we have a long page and you click on that, it'll actually jump you to the top. Well, that's not what I want. I want this to go to the home page of my site. And by default, pretty much every site out there uses this / for your home page. The same as when we, if you go to apple.com or unb.ca or google.com, you don't have to put anything after the domain name. And if you just put a /, it just says go to the default page for this site. So we'll leave a / there. About, I think a good URL for that would be /about. And down here where we have general's quarters and major's suite, I'm going to put those like this. Rooms, general's quarters, with no punctuation other than the hyphen. And for the major's suite, I'll go rooms, major's suite. And again, no apostrophe in there. You don't want that. You just want to go with letters and dashes. That's the simplest and safest way to go with it, or numbers for that matter. And contact will be /contact, of course. /contact. Now I can change these at any point, but for right now, let's make sure these actually would point to those pages. So if I go to rooms and roll over general's quarters and look down in the very bottom right-hand corner of my window, it says yes, it's going to go to /rooms/general's quarters. Good. Contact will go to /contact. Major suite, about, and home takes me to the default. Okay, so I have a navigation bar. I don't have anything to link to yet except for the home page. I can click on that, and that takes me to here. So, but it will on a web server take me where it's supposed to go. So I know that's actually going to work. All right, now let's put some other things in here. One of the things that I said I wanted was a carousel. And if you go back to the documentation and you look under components in Bootstrap, you're going to find carousel right there. All right, and a carousel, how it works, I can read all that. You can read all that at your leisure. What I want, again, is an example. So I'm going to copy this example. Try that again. I can just click the copy button and go back here and think about where I want it. Do I want it inside the container? Let's try that first, okay? So if I paste it in here and format it a little bit better, so I'll just move it over like that, and I have div ID equals carousel example slides only. Okay, I'm not sure what that is yet, but I'll leave it alone. Class is carousel slide, data ride equals carousel. All right, we have image source. Well, I actually can't use ... for the image source. In HTML, when you want a picture on your on anywhere on your page, you have to give it a source. And the source can be a complete URL if you're pointing to an image on somebody else's site, but that's impolite, so don't do that. More often, it's a relative URL that says, look on this server and look in this path for the images. Now, a minute ago, over here, we put in our working HTML folder, we created a static folder. Inside of that, we have images, and then we have outside.ping, tray.ping, and woman-laptop.ping. Let's go with that one first, woman-laptop. So I'll put in my path name. And because my file, which is this, is right here, and inside of that, or right beside that, is a folder called static, and then a folder called images, and then we have woman-laptop.ping. I'll just copy that first part of the name, save myself some typing. So I'm now going to go to /static/images/woman-laptop.ping. And alt, this is the alternative text. If somebody's using a browser with images disabled, as sometimes people do if they have very slow bandwidth, you need to give it some descriptive text. So I'll just put woman and laptop. Okay. Now I'm not sure what the class dblock w100 are, but I'll figure that out later. I need to have my second image. So let's just copy this to save some typing, and we will paste this in here, and we'll change the image bit in a minute. What were the other two images called? Tray and outside. So outside and tray. All right, and here we should put in some alternative text. Tray with coffee and outside. Doesn't matter what I'm putting in there right now, but I'm going to save that. Okay, so I've saved it. Is there anything else I need to do? Let's go back and look at the documentation. Okay, so we have this. It says with controls. Well, I won't worry about the controls right now. Let's just reload the page and see what happens. Oh, that didn't work. So, woman and laptop. It didn't work because I started with a slash here, which I'm going to have to do in the final version of this. But because I'm not actually serving this from a real web server, I'm just loading a local file, I need to remove that opening slash. All right, let's try that again. Hey, look at that. I have a picture. Is it going to move? Yes, it did. Okay, it was very slow, but it slid left to right. I now have a picture, but really, I made those pictures pretty big. And if you open them up in Photoshop or your favorite editor, I really don't want this space on the right and on the left. Is there any way I can get rid of that? Well, a minute ago I said, should we put this inside the container? And we did. But because it's inside the container, it actually adds that spacing on the left and the right. So let's move it out of there and format a little better and save this and get rid of these spaces. And let's see what happens now. Wow, that's pretty big, but that looks good. It actually takes up almost the entire screen. Okay, but when I looked at the preview for the carousel on the Bootstrap site, it actually allowed me to have text over top of it. Can I have text over top of it? Well, let's go back to our Bootstrap site and go down and see if there's any more examples. With indicators, what's this down here? Those are just indicators with captions. Here we are, captions. Maybe I can do it that way. So what they include is the inside, let's go back here. They have a div with these indicators. I'll copy those two just to see what happens. And where did those go? Right after the opening div tag. So they have 3 slides, and so do I. So I should be able to put my indicators right here then. Let's just try that first before we try to get the text working properly. Okay, move that back. I'll format that later. Okay. So this says, well, let's look at this again. Carousel example captions, carousel example captions, carousel example captions. That says my target is carousel example captions. Let's go back and look at theirs again. Where's their carousel example captions? Ah, it's right up here. So what I need to do is make this match these. So I'm going to call this just my main carousel. And that is an ID. And the thing about IDs is that they have to be unique on the page. So you can't have, well, you can, but you shouldn't have 2 IDs exactly the same for any 2 elements on your web page. And I'm saying here, when I click on this, apparently it's going to go to whatever ID is specified here. So I'm going to copy this, which doesn't have a hashtag, and I'm going to paste it here, but leave the hashtag. And I'll do the same thing here, and the same thing here, and the same thing here. So now apparently, when I click on whatever this indicator is, it's going to take me to main carousel, main carousel. Okay, down here, do I have any other examples of those IDs? No, should be okay. So let's see what happens when I reload my page. Reload. And there are my indicators. And do they work? They do. I can jump all over the place. Perfect. Okay. Now we wanted to get back to our captions. So let's find out how they did these captions. So they have carousel inner. Do I have a carousel inner? I do right here. They have image, and then they have this. This is some text. So let's copy that. And it went right after the image and before the closing tag for the carousel item. So after the image and before the closing tag. So that says second slide. That's not good. Let's call this first slide. And I'll just copy this. So it was here, div class equals carousel item. So this div matches that, and these are inside there. Let's copy that and do it for our second. Right after the image. We'll call it second. And the third, right after the image. Third. Okay, let's save it and see what happens. Reload the page. Hey, I have some text. It's not formatted the way I want. It's hard to read with the background, but I have text there. I can do the formatting later. And second and third. It works great. Perfect. All right, so we now have a navigation bar at the top, which disappears. We'll fix that later. Okay, there must be a way to make that stick there. Then we have some text underneath this. Well, this text isn't great, and I probably want a little bit of space between this slide, the carousel at the top, and whatever I put below it. So let's have a look at how we might do that. First of all, I don't need 2 columns here, so I'll just get rid of this first thing altogether, this first div class equals row. And I want some space there. Div class equals row, div class equals call. So let's give it a title to start with. H1 will be a title. Welcome to, and we need to have a name for our bed and breakfast, and we'll just make something up. What shall I call this? Welcome to, well, I used military titles for the room, majors and generals and things like that. So welcome to Fort, and I need a name, Fort Smythe, bed and breakfast. And I'll close my tag. And then I'll just put some text in here. Your home away from home, and again I don't care what this says, your home away from home, set on the majestic waters of the Atlantic Ocean. This will be a vacation to remember. That's enough for now. I don't really care what that text says. I'm not really actually going to be booking any rooms. I'm just demonstrating how things might work. So before we go any further, let's save that. So there it is. Okay, maybe that should be centered. And I can do that really easily in Bootstrap. Class equals text center, text-center. So I'm adding one of Bootstrap's built-in classes, and I'm saying for this H1 tag, I want you to center it. Text center does that for text, and it's now centered. And I also want some space on top of it. And here's some really useful utility classes that are built into Bootstrap. I want a margin at the top of this element, the H1 tag, and I want it to be, choose a number between 1 and 5. Let's try 3. Margin top 3. And look, it moved it down. Maybe a little bit more. Margin top 4. Save. Go back. Now, see, it's right here right now. I'll put my cursor right beside it so you can see how tall it is. And when I reload the page, it moves it down a little bit more. There, that spacing looks a little bit better. I really don't need those right column and left column, so let's get rid of those. And now, what do we want to have after that? We probably want some pictures of our rooms, but we don't have those yet. So I'll just put a little bit more text in here so it looks a little bit better. Maybe you want a full paragraph or two. So I will copy this, and I will simply hit return and paste and return and paste. And because, as we said before, HTML ignores those spaces, even though I have this formatted really badly, it should look like real text, and it does. It puts the space in there and ignores the multiple spaces. Okay, so that's enough to get me started. I've now created a landing page. Is there anything missing from here? Well, I have my nav bar, which is going to go away soon. I have a link to the home page. I have a link to the about page. I can show the rooms. I need to create all of these pages, of course. And I can contact. Maybe I should think this through. Shouldn't I have a means of booking or making a reservation right from the home page? Yeah, I should. So let's go in here, back to our nav bar at the top. And let's find this part right here, which is contact, and copy that and paste it. And I'll just call it book now. And I'll make that URL /make reservation. Okay. And if I reload that, now I have a book now, perfect, and I have a contact. Okay, and maybe I should put a call out down here in another section, another row. So let's go down here, and I'm going to make a call out that invites people to make a reservation. So first thing I'll do is move all these to the left, then move them this way just so it looks a little bit better. And I'll put my p tags on their own lines just so, again, so it's formatted better. And then I'll create another row. So I will say div class equals row. And it does have to be lowercase. Class names are case sensitive. Have a closing div. Inside of that, I will make a column. Div class equals call. And I want the content of this to be centered. So I will also put text-center in this. And I'll have a closing div. Now what can we put in there that's going to get people's attention? Well, let's go see what Bootstrap gives us and what we might be able to take advantage of. So let's look here. Navbar, popovers, spinners, toast, tooltips. There's got to be something here that will actually do it for us. Well, buttons. Buttons will be nice. Let's try buttons. Oh, look. We have these nice buttons, different styles. All right, so let's say, what color do we want on our page? Let's go back here and look again. Well, we have dark colors here. Then we have dark colors here. It's kind of bland so far. Let's make it something that's going to catch people's attention. So I will choose this green color. Green is good. That's success. And here's an example of a button. Now, there's actually a couple of ways of doing this. I'm going to show you both. Okay. Down here, I will, first of all, just stick the button in exactly as they have it. But I'll change the laid. Oh, I chose the wrong one. I wanted success. Make reservation now. Reservation now. Okay, so there's a button, and if I come back here and reload this page and scroll down, I have make reservation now. That's okay. But maybe I want to do it a little differently. This is a button. I really need it to link to the make reservation page. Well, the cool thing is I can actually apply the button styling to an ahref, to a standard link. Ahref equals, and it's going to go to, what do we call that link up here? Make reservations. Let me copy that. Come down here. Paste it in here. And now I'll add a class to this ahref. Class equals button success. And then I just put my text, make reservation now. But I'm not closing a button, I'm closing an A tag. So if I save that and come back here, I should have two buttons that look exactly the same. This one is a button, which is normally used to submit a form or something like that. And this one is just a link. And I want the link. I'm not actually submitting a form here. I'm not filling anything out. So I'll get rid of that one. And the last thing I want to point to is that the bottom of my page is really, it just kind of stops. And normally when you go to web pages, each page has a footer. So let's put a footer in here, okay? And we can do it just using a standard div. So we can go div class equals row, div class equals call, close that div, and close the div. But I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to give it a class of my footer, which doesn't exist. Now what happens if I put something in here like this and I say, well, I'm going to have actually two columns. I'll have one on the left and one on the right. I'll have three columns, one in the middle too. So I will copy this, paste, paste, and this will be left, this will be middle, and this will be right. Now if I save that and reload the page, I actually get left, middle, and right. Again, this is all formatted in here. I want my footer to extend to the edges of the screen just like it does at the top. And how do I do that? Well, we already know. We can take this div out of here, cut it, and put it outside of the closing container div. And this closes the container. And remember, the container draws things in from the left and the right. And it does it to help format things on different screens properly. So now I'm going to put my footer outside of that. And see, does it extend? And now it does extend to the left and the right. Now I gave this a class of my footer. Why would I do that? And we're going to talk more about CSS later, but let's just have a quick look at it right now. I can include cascading style sheets like bootstraps using this fancy syntax. Link rel equals style sheet that tells it it's a style sheet. Then it tells it where on the internet to go and get it. So we're going to Bootstrap's CSS files on some site called cdn.jsdeliver.net. But I can also define my own styles right up here. Inside the head tag, I can say style with a closing tag style. And down here at the bottom, in my footer, I've given this class, this div, a class of my footer. Well, let's copy that and come up here and paste its name in, but I'm going to start it with a dot because you have to. When you're talking about CSS classes that you define yourself, they start with a dot. I can redefine other things in CSS. For example, we'll do this in a minute. I can redefine the contents or the styling of a paragraph tag. It doesn't have a dot, therefore it says, oh, you're talking about one of the HTML tags that exist as part of the HTML standard, which the P tag happens to be. But I'm dealing with my footer right now. So we'll explore these in more detail when we talk about CSS a bit later on, but let's try a couple of things. I'm going to say background color, and I'm going to give it a color. And the color, right now I could just say red. I'll do that. It's going to be really ugly, just so you know. But let's go back here. We've saved that. Reload the page, and look, my background for my footer is now red. Well, that's kind of nice. Let's not make it red. Let's make it green, and save that, and reload it. And now it's green. Well, that's pretty good. We can do other things as well. Notice how this has a bunch of well, no space between here and here. Let's see if we can play with that. Might work, might not. Let's give it a try. There's another CSS directive called margin top, and we need to specify how big it's going to be. Now you can do it this way, say 25 px for pixels, and that talks about picture element, the smallest unit you find on a computer's display or a phone's display. I said put a margin at the top that's 25 pixels in size, and let's reload that. And it did. It put a little tiny margin there. Now, pixels are great, but they're also dangerous because some screens don't respond the way you would want them to. Another way of doing this is to use the class known as, or the unit of measurement known as an M. So I say 1M, and that stands for the width of a capital letter M. And if I reload that, it does 1M. Let's try 2Ms or 1.5Ms. You can use fractions here too. You can't with pixels, but you can with Ms. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay. But notice how the word middle is really crammed at the top. First of all, I want this footer to be the same size on every page, no matter what's in it. So let's make a few other things. So my footer is a div. And a div is what's known as a block level element. Okay? That means I can do things like this. Height, and I'll say 5 ems. Let's reload that. Now the footer is much bigger. That's good, but the words are all crammed right up to the top and right to the edge. Okay, let's try something else. What we really want to add here is some padding at the top, and some padding on the left, and some padding on the right. So I can just do this. Padding, 1em, and save, and reload. And look at that. Things are much better. But black text on a green background? Well, first of all, I don't really want a green background. I want to have a dark background. And I mean, I can't just put the color dark. I could put black. Let's see what that looks like. Save. Okay, I can almost see those words, but it is darker. Black's not bad. We can also use another syntax, and the syntax is hexadecimal colors. And they begin with a pound sign or a hash mark or whatever you want to call it, that little crosshatch thing from your keyboard. 0000000 is black. So there should be no change here, and there's not. And hexadecimal is counting from 0 to 16. So if I count to 1 to 9 in hexadecimal, it would be, or 0 to 9, it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you would think you would go to 10, but it's not. In hexadecimal, it's A, then B, C, D, E, F. And F is the highest that you can count because it's base 16. So to make something that's almost black, but not quite, maybe I could go, well, A, B, C, D, E, F. I could go, 0 is the low one. What if I go 0, 3, 0, 3, 0, 3? Let's see what that looks like. I can reload it. I didn't really see much difference. Did I save it? Reload it. Yeah, still not much difference. Let's try 3E, 3D, 3D. See what that looks like. Reload. Oh, that's better. Okay. Now, you could guess. You can guess about these things. But you can also either use Photoshop, which is what I do, because I have a subscription to Adobe's Photoshop, and if you're going to work in web development, you're probably going to get one too. Or I can just go to my favorite search engine and say, find online color picker. There's got to be one out there. Color online picker. There we are. Okay, so here's one, and I want to pick a color. And it tells me there's my code right there. So I click on this. Well, actually, it's allowing me to choose from this. Not perfect, but can I find a dark color? There's one down here, or up in the corner. Okay, let's go with that. That's kind of a blue, slate blue. Let's see what that looks like. And it doesn't matter for right now. We're just trying to demonstrate how this works. Can't have 2 hash marks. And let's go back to my page and reload. All right, that looks good. But I want the text to be white now. I can't even read that. Well, I can control that in CSS as well. I can just say color, white. Reload. That looks better. And color white is fine, but I can also go color # FF, FF, FF. They don't have to be uppercase letters, but I just get in the habit of doing that sometimes, and it still works. All right, maybe I don't want this text to be quite so big either. Well, I can actually change that. Font size. Now I could specify 12 point or 10 pixels. If we did 10 pixels, for example, it'll be pretty small. Or I can also say font size 80%. I want it to be 80% of whatever the font size defaulting on the page is. And that's not bad. All right, I have now constructed a landing page that consists of a nav bar with links that don't go anywhere yet because we haven't created those pages. I have a paragraph of text, and then I have a link to a make reservation now, and I have a footer. And I haven't put anything useful in the footer yet, but we now have the starting point for our web page. Last thing I want to talk about. You may remember that the very first step, or one of the very first steps we did, was to come and copy and paste this stuff. So this stuff is from the Bootstrap's Getting Started section in their documentation, and they include jQuery and Popper and Bootstrap. And the reason these things are included is so that we can have the carousel work. This is powered by JavaScript behind the scenes. And the drop-down menu will work. This is powered by JavaScript behind the scenes. If I come back here and comment this stuff out, okay, and save it and go back here and reload the page, well, this isn't going to do anything anymore. My carousel doesn't do anything anymore. It's not sliding. It still shows up, but it doesn't work. Now, there's one thing I want to tell you about. I'll re-enable that and save it, and this will all come back. So now my menu should work, and it does. jQuery is falling out of favor. And it's falling out of favor because jQuery was built years and years ago to add functionality to browsers that was not built into the browser. So everybody started implementing JavaScript in the early days, way back in the Netscape Navigator days from the 90s, and the Internet Explorer days. Everybody kind of took their own path and started doing things in their own way. And of course, that caused a lot of grief for people like me and people like you who are trying to learn to do web development. So jQuery was developed to actually implement functionality that didn't exist in the browsers and kind of give a standard syntax to write JavaScript. And it works really well, don't get me wrong. And it's got a rich ecosystem with a ton of plugins. And if you want to use jQuery, you go right to town. Right now, something like 65% of the sites out there still use jQuery. But for people who are well versed in technology and don't just copy and paste things, people who actually think about it, well, we understand that jQuery, the problem that jQuery solved back in the day, doesn't exist anymore. Browsers are really smart. JavaScript has gotten much, much better. I still think the language is a mess, but it powers much of the internet, and you have to know it. But it's way better than it used to be. So there are tons of sites out there like this. You can say, you don't need jQuery. Look at that. It's the first result in Google's preview. So if I search for that, you can see all kinds of sites that tell you why you don't need jQuery anymore and why you should be using pure JavaScript. And in fact, Bootstrap, in their next release, which is version 5, which should be out sometime next year, they're removing the dependency on jQuery. And they're doing it for a couple of reasons. To start with, jQuery is not updated as fast as it should be. Earlier this year, when I'm writing this course in 2020, earlier this year, they released an update to jQuery, which broke its implementation in Bootstrap, the most widely used framework for CSS out there. And of course, they submitted a ticket. The people that maintain Bootstrap submitted a ticket to jQuery, and jQuery said, yeah, we'll get that fixed as soon as we can. And it took them a very long time to fix that. So long, in fact, that the folks at Twitter had to go do a temporary patch just so sites would keep working. So it's not updated as much as it used to be. More importantly, it's solving problems that don't exist anymore. And it actually requires a fairly large download to come down to your computer. So it slows sites down. So in the not too distant future, you're going to be able to remove jQuery from your projects. And my rationale here is going to be pretty straightforward. I'm going to say this is a kind of a transitional time. I'll leave jQuery implemented for now, knowing that when I update my templates, my Golang templates, to use Bootstrap 5, once I'm satisfied that it's going to meet my needs, then I can remove my jQuery dependency. But the only reason I'm having jQuery included in this project and in this course is so we can have this carousel, we can have these drop-down menus, and anything else I want to choose from the Bootstrap framework. I am not going to write any JavaScript that uses Bootstrap or any of the other frameworks like Vue.js or Google's Angular. I'm going to write pure vanilla JavaScript. Now, I'm doing that for another reason. When we get to the JavaScript session, I'll talk more about that. But I'm doing it because people who depend upon jQuery or people who depend upon Vue.js or any of the other frameworks, and there are some really good ones out there, a lot of them are using it like a magic black box. They have no idea how it does what it does. If you take the time to learn basic JavaScript, plain vanilla JavaScript, and then you move on to use Vue.js or use another framework, you're never going to use jQuery. I don't encourage you to anyway, because it's dying. Then you will actually have far more control. You'll understand how things work, why they work, and you'll discover in a lot of cases, you might default to saying, oh, I'm probably going to use Angular for this project. Well, you may not need to. Maybe you can do everything you need in plain vanilla JavaScript, and you're removing a dependency from your project. I'm not a big fan of dependencies. I use them when I have to and when it makes sense, But if I can do it myself in a code that I know is going to have a long shelf life because it's using a core language like JavaScript or Golang, that's what I'm going to default to. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to do in this course. But of course, it's entirely up to you. You may already know jQuery and want to use it. If so, you go right to town. You've got good company. 65% of the internet is with you on that. But I'm not going to in this course. I'm going to go through and teach everyone the basics of JavaScript, and that'll just make us much more efficient and effective as programmers. All right, so I think we've got a lot done for this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll go create some pages.